Hello, everyone. My first story comes from the Grandfather Tales. Now, my husband found this book at an old book sale. I had a paperback copy of it, but when I realized that I had a 1948 edition of the Grandfather Tales, well, you can see I've been marking a lot of them. Two of the stories that I'm going to be doing today come from this book. The first one I'm starting out with is Old Dry Frye. Now, this is my version as opposed to Richard Chase, who wrote the Grandfather's Tales. So it's a little bit different. Now, Old Dry Frye was a saddlebag parson. Now, you probably don't know what saddlebag parson was if you're a younger person. They were preachers that way back in the days when there weren't roads and just paths and trails and traces, they would ride a horse or a mule up over the mountains to go back in and provide the gospel and bring the gospel to the people up in the mountain. They would provide the Marian and the they usually wouldn't hold the burying, but sometimes they would, and baptizing. And he would always preach whenever he came to the community. So everybody knew Old Dry Frye. And one of the things they knew about Old Dry Frye, not too many people knew where his name came from, but really that's another story in itself. But Old Dry Frye, well, he had this one thing that mostly it annoyed the little kids that knew him, because if Old Dry Frye came to your house, he would beg you to fix fried chicken. And if you were a kid, you could be dependent on not getting any, because Old Dry Frye would eat every last piece of that chicken. Well, that didn't bother the old widow Williams any. She didn't have no kids to worry about, but she sure did like the company of Old Dry Frye, and he could smell chicken frying from miles away. So anytime he was in the neighborhood, she was always sure to make up or she thought she was coming. Oh man, she would have some fried chicken going. So sure enough, she fried the chicken, and Old Dry Frye showed up on her doorstep, and she sat him down, and he was eating that chicken. Well, he was a bit of a glutton, I'm afraid, when it came to that chicken. And he was eating so fast and so much that bone got caught in his throat. And before the widow could get over to pound on his back to free up, because that widow wasn't moving very fast, to free up that bone, why, Old Dry Frye just keeled right over. Now that widow, she was really freaked out. Law me, I done gone and killed Old Dry Frye. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Oh, she took a breath and she drug him in to the parlor, laid him out on the sofa, put him a quilt over top of him so he'd look like he was napping. And she paced the floor and she paced the floor. And finally, she got an idea. Why, her neighbor had been complaining that somebody had been bothering her chickens, and he was going to shoot anybody that came too close to his chickens. So that night, she drug Old Dry Frye over to her neighbors. Now, neighbors then in those days weren't very close. He lived a couple of miles away, and she drugged him, so it was way past midnight when she got in there, and she leaned him up against the chicken house. And the dogs were carrying on, but she got out of there as quick as she could, and she had just jumped into the woods and headed racing back towards home. Well, little old ladies don't race too well, but she was going as fast as she could to get back home. When the farmer came out, he saw a shadow. He had his lantern, but he couldn't see, only a shadow out there by the chicken coop. So he put the lantern down and he picked up his rifle, and he says, "You by the chicken coop, you better get out of here or I'm gonna shoot you." Well, the shadow didn't move. So the old farmer, he shoots over top of the head, and he said, "I said you better get out of here or I'm gonna shoot you." The guy didn't move the shoulder. He just stood there. So the farmer shot at the ground, and old Dry Frye, that shadow just keeled right over. So the farmer comes running out there and he goes, "Law me, it's old Dry Frye, and I just killed old Dry Frye. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do?" Now he knew that old Dry Frye was coming here for a baptism ceremony the next morning. So he drug old Dry Frye down to the river. And it just so happens that there's a bend in the river, and as it comes out of the river bend, now it's really deep on the bend, that's where the kids use it for the swimming hole, but it shallows out just past that, and that's where they used to baptize people. Well, he drug old Dry Frye up on the cliff above the bend, and he lifted old Dry Frye's knees up, and he put old Dry Frye's elbows, that is, on his knees, and he had old Dry Frye sitting here looking as if he was contemplating the water, and he left him that way. Next morning, young Bobby shows up. Now, young Bobby, oh, he is ornery, always getting into trouble, and attitude. Oh, well, that kid saw old Dry Frye, and he yelled up to him, "Howdy there, Mr. Old Dry Frye." But old Dry Frye didn't answer him. Well, of course, you knew it was old Dry Frye because everybody knows old Dry Frye. But old Dry Frye hadn't answered. And that made Bobby really mad. He took it quite personally. He said, "I said, hello there, Mr. Old Dry Frye." Well, of course, old Dry Frye did not answer. Bobby was going to skip stones when he came down to the river, but he picked up a stone and he thought, "I got a better idea." He says, "Mr. Old Dry Frye, if you don't say hello to me, I'm going to take this stone and I'm going to hit you." Of course, old Dry Frye never said a word. So Bobby took that stone and he threw it, and it hit old Dry Frye, and old Dry Frye just went right down into the swimming hole with a big plop, and he sunk clear to the bottom. And just about that time, as Bobby was trying to figure out what to do, up the road comes the people singing, "Shall we gather by the river, the beautiful river?" And Bobby decides he needed to be saved. Yeah. So he went down to join them, and they were all there singing, and he joined them in the singing, and they sang and finished that song, and then they sang another song. And then they sang a third song. And after the third song, one of the folks says, "Has anybody seen old Dry Frye?" And the widow Williams says, "Well, he was at my house for dinner last night, but I haven't seen him since," which was the truth. But nobody else said anything. So they sang one more song and passed the hat, and all went home, Bobby tailing behind them. Well, that night, Bobby came back with a gunny sack and a big, long pole, and he poked the bottom of that swimming hole until he found old Dry Frye's body. And he drug that body up on shore, and he stuffed his body into the gunny sack. And little Bobby goes up the road. He's pulling that gunny sack full of old Dry Frye. He's a ways down the road, and he hears some voices. He gets scared. He leaves that gunny sack full of old Dry Frye right in the middle of the road, and he jumps into the bushes. From the other direction are coming some young men who had a gunny sack of their own, and they saw the gunny sack in the road, and they got scared, and they dropped theirs right beside it, and they jumped into the woods on the opposite side of the road. They waited, and they waited, and they waited. And then they decided the coast was clear, and they couldn't, the gunny sack had been so heavy, it took both of them to carry it. So they grabbed the gunny sack and they left the other one, figuring they'd come back for it later. Well, when they were gone, Bobby jumps out of the weeds, and he realizes they've taken the wrong gunny sack. And he looks in there, and he found 2 hams, 2 sides of bacon. And he took that straight home to his mama, though he probably knew if he gave it a thought where it came from. The other boys took their gunny sack up and hung it in the smokehouse and went on to bed. The next morning, their mama came out. She got her kitchen knife. She was going out to the smokehouse. She cut that bag, and out drops old Dry Frye. Well, old Dry Frye was laying there on the floor, and all she could do was scream. And she turned around. There was a screen door on the smokehouse, and she ran right through that screen door, and she ran right through the screen door that was also in the kitchen. And she just stood in her kitchen and screamed and screamed and screamed. She couldn't find any words. But when the boys came down, she pointed out to the smokehouse, and they went running out to the smokehouse, and there they see the gunny sack ripped open, and on the floor, old Dry Frye. Law me, Ma's gone, done, and killed old Dry Frye. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? They're going to hang her. Now, one of the brothers was a little more clever than the others, and he says, hey, those horses up on the mountain, I got an idea. So he went up on the mountain, and they got one of those wild horses. And that evening, they got an old saddle, and they put it on that wild horse, which was not an easy task. Then they got old Dry Frye up there. They tied his feet to each of the stirrups and his hands to the saddle horn. Then they let go of that horse and swapped it on the rear, and they started running after it with their guns, shouting, horse thief, horse thief, horse thief. And they were running down the road. They ran past the widow's, and she saw that it was old Dry Frye on that horse, and she came running out, horse thief, horse thief. And they ran a little bit farther, and the farmer came out, and he saw it was old Dry Frye, because everybody knew old Dry Frye. And he came out with his rifle, and he started running, and every once in a while he would pause, and he'd fire off his rifle and yell, horse thief, horse thief. And they ran further down the road, and little Bobby saw, and Bobby got in the chase too. Well, all of them chasing. It seemed like everybody in the town was chasing this horse, but nobody could catch it. And they say that sometimes when the moon rises far high on the ridge, you can see a little silhouette of a horse with a rider that's bobbing as it goes. That's the ghost of old Dry Frye.